Guruai Varuai Arulai Kugane. Pranam to Sri Sadguru. Most revered and respected Swamiji, Sri Hariprasad Ji. Respected diplomat, Sri Tirumurthy sir, who has given a beautiful keynote address for this peace conference. In fact, I would say that though we have been arranging this peace conference for the past 7 years, our diplomat sir has given a new methodology for understanding the notion of peace. In fact, I should say, as a student of philosophy, that his thought-provoking address, which is very stimulating, has given us a new direction for peace. In fact, I was amazed, I should tell him, I was amazed to listen to him, because though we have been, philosophers have been talking about peace, religious people have been talking about peace, but as a diplomat, he has given a new methodology for understanding the notion of peace. And it is not a theoretical speech, I should say. He has given a practical orientation, and the methodology which he has suggested is something remarkable. And I am very grateful to you, sir, because I have learned a lot from you. And I must tell that the peace conference has one nuclear issue this time, namely right education. And our Swamiji is a very great personality, and he has been arranging various conferences and seminars on various social themes which are of interest to philosophers and religious people, even political thinkers. And we have got a very high regard to our Swamiji. We respect him very much. Just now one incident took place, I just want to narrate it. Because all of us know that in any inaugural address, any inaugural session, the presidential speech would be the last. That is a pattern which we follow in all academic platforms. Swamiji called me and said whether he should speak or I should speak, in the sense that he has to give a felicitation address, benedict address. Then I have to address, give you the presidential address. But I said, Swamiji, the custom is that the presidential address is the last. But in your case, you are our Swamiji. And whatever you say should be the final word on peace. But he said, no, nothing doing. You follow the academic method which you have been following in universities and colleges. This simply shows, this simply shows that how he follows the tradition which is practiced in academic platform. Because in academic platform, we respect our Swamiji very much. That is the reason why a few years ago, the Indian Philosophical Congress, which is the highest body in India for philosophers, has chosen him as the general president of the Congress. And he delivered the presidential address. And also, another thing which I should say is he was there for all the 5 days. And he was there as a president and stayed there and gave, wherever necessary, his remarks on various papers presented in the seminar. So I take this opportunity to thank our Swamiji for making this wonderful seminar. In fact, in 2019, we had this theme, namely, family is the cradle of peace. And this time, Swamiji has chosen this theme, namely that education, right education is the key for peace. So Swamiji's interest, he is not only a religious leader, but a person who is interested in academic activities. And I should also say, as a student of philosophy, that in South India, he is the one who has been doing the work of the educational institutions, in the sense that he has been arranging many conferences and seminars with regard to many themes like social transformation or theme concerning social upliftment. So he's the one who has a concern for the human society as such. So I take this opportunity to thank him for organizing this wonderful seminar conference. And I'll take just 10 minutes, not more than that, because philosophers have the habit of talking hours together without any content. And I don't want to be a part of that. So let me very briefly explain what a philosopher's approach would be with regard to peace. Now, in many university departments, we have a department of peace studies, because peace studies department mainly has a concern for peace, understanding the notion of peace as culture. In fact, it is said by John Paul Ledrich, a well-known philosopher, he says, firstly, peace is related with the right to dignity, the respect, and minimum fulfillment of each person. And further, he said that we look for human fulfillment as much as possible. So this methodology, which we have been following in peace studies department, has one notion, namely how peace has a close link with the notion of forgiveness and reconciliation. Because these two notions, namely forgiveness and reconciliation, has a close link with the notion of peace. In fact, the UNESCO Chair of Philosophy for Peace talks about these two concepts, namely forgiveness and reconciliation. And they mainly concentrate on the post-war situation or post-war context, and argue that how forgiveness and reconciliation is very much essential for the human society. In fact, it is said that it is true that we can hurt each other, but it is also true that we can care for each other. This is a very important aspect which we have to take into account from the philosophical perspective. So after the hurtful action, we can forgive and reconcile if we want. This is what the many peace philosophers, I would call them the philosophers of peace, who talk about the forgiveness, and they say the forgiveness is a gift. It is a free gift. The victim bestows upon the offender, since they can do nothing to earn it by themselves. And the concept of forgiveness and reconciliation has been very much discussed in various philosophical schools, and various philosophical ideologies are very much available. For example, there was one Danish existential philosopher by name Kierkegaard, and he says forgiveness is never earned. Forgiveness is not to be paid for, and it cannot be paid for. And another thinker, very important, a revolutionary thinker of this century, that is Jacques Derrida, he talks about the unconditional forgiveness. Madam Indraji is here, who is very much familiar with Derrida. Derrida says that unconditional forgiveness, which would be that one that does not demand repentance. And similarly, another political philosopher by name Jean Hampton says, we cannot forgive in order to reform the wrongdoer, but we should forgive not because the wrongdoer has repented, but as a step toward bringing his repentance about, making it at least easier for him. So all this clearly make one point clear. What is that? forgiveness is an entrance to reconciliation. So the purpose or the teleology of this forgiveness would take us to reconciliation. So reconciliation is possible provided we have the open mind. In fact, our Sadhguru has talked about this sort of openness which we are discussing now. In fact, I would always say this is a phenomenological openness. Once again, I would like to quote Madam Indraji, Professor Indraji, who has talked about this in detail. So this phenomenological touching or the phenomenological understanding, which Sadhguru has talked about, has a concern for human society. In fact, we have to keep it in mind, it is Sadhguru who has talked about the social transformation. And she said that social transformation is possible provided there is a change in the attitude of the individual. This means for our Sadhguru, if the individual changes, then the whole society can change. Few years ago, when Sadhguru was alive, she visited my department at the Madras University, and she was mainly responsible for organizing one wonderful seminar on social transformation. And in that seminar, she has talked about the phenomenological transformation. I am using some philosophical terms, kindly forgive me. But phenomenological reconciliation means it is the personal or the change that one can take in the life of one's own, which means by phenomenological touching or phenomenological reconciliation, we mean that how that change can affect me. That is, it must start from me. This is what we call phenomenology in simple terms. So it is a first-person attitude. First person, that is, first of all, I should change so that I can change my family and my family can change the entire society, something like that. So the nucleus of this reconciliation, according to Sadhguru, should start with the individual. So this social transformation, she argued in our department, that is in the philosophy department, Madras University, she said that social transformation, all of us need social transformation, but Sadhguru said that social transformation is possible provided you are ready to change. And this is something very much remarkable, and this has a very methodology of understanding the notion of reconciliation. So, but Sadhguru always used to say reconciliation is not so easy, but it is a most effective way to address those human relations which are disturbing us always. So this methodology of Sadhguru gives a way out. That is, she gives a solution to some of our problems, and she says that this is possible, reconciliation is possible once we re-establish the broken relation so that human society can progress. So the notion of peace as well as reconciliation, according to Sadhguru, should start with the individual transformation. And in fact, all our religious scriptures talk about that. And in the contemporary scene, we come across great thinkers like Leo Tolstoy and Mahatma Gandhi, who has a concern for peace as well as reconciliation. And peace is possible, according to Sadhguru. Once again, I would like to quote Sadhguru because there are certain parallels. In fact, a few years ago, I made a presentation comparing Sadhguru with Mahatma Gandhi, and I argued that absolute peace is possible. This is a question which disturbs all the political thinkers as well as philosophers, whether absolute peace is possible. And Sadhguru as well as Mahatma Gandhi, they have given a new direction. That is, both of them argued, I could see certain parallels. Both of them could argue that absolute peace is possible. In fact, I should say our Sadhguru has given a new methodology. What is that? She says absolute peace is not an impossibility. She says it is possible. But this is possible provided there is absolute renunciation. This is a very beautiful concept which I rejoice for the main reason that, if you read the life history of Sadhguru, you would understand how she has sacrificed everything for others. So this sort of understanding is something very remarkable. And this is possible provided you have a openness. This openness is very much essential. In fact, all our texts, religious texts, give a new direction. One example is from Jainism, and our my good friend Professor Vincent Segar has done his PhD on Jainism. You would also agree with me that Jainism gives a scope for that. What is that? The Anekantavada. That is the plurality of us. If you are ready to accept the others, right, then there is a possibility that reconciliation is possible. But most of the time, we are very stubborn that our own views are right and others are totally wrong. So there is also another way of understanding the whole problem of Anekantavada, Jain perspective, from Western side also. For example, if you come across thinkers like Levinas, once again I quote to Professor Indra Madam, Levinas is a well-known Western philosopher. He talks about the other. The other is very important. In fact, you would say, I exist because of the other. It is other who gives me meaning. If I alone exist, then that cannot be a world. So the other must also participate in this world and all the activities. So the peace conference or peace studies is possible or meaningful provided we accept the other. That is the reason why Foucault, the well-known French philosopher, said long back, celebrate the difference. There are differences. We can't say that we are all one and the same. By human nature, we are one and the same, but we are different. We are different from one another. A is different from B. Otherwise, all of us will have the same name and same form. No, there are differences. So, but difference is essential and it is part of life. But celebrate the difference is the statement made by Foucault. Thereby, he argued that we cannot speak of identity. Identity, of course, there are different ways of understanding the term identity. Here, we mean that when people are different from one another, the difference is that difference cannot be neglected, but celebrate the difference. So if you are ready to accept the other one, and secondly, if you are ready to renunciate everything, that is absolute renunciation, and thirdly, by celebrating the difference, one can give proper meaning to the term peace. So I would like, I have written a lot, but I just conclude by saying that most of the time, the conflict arises because we think that other is always wrong. We start with the presupposition that I am right and you are wrong. So that reconciliation is possible provided you give a scope for the other. That is the reason why in the Western tradition, as well as in Indian tradition, in fact, Professor Bhatt sir was talking about in the morning very beautifully. He has talked, I don't know whether some of you have observed that minute philosophical depth which he has showed in his speech, wherein he argued that the concept of we is very important in Indian tradition. Because in Western tradition, I and thou, you and me, that difference is shown. I and thou. Martin Buber has written a very beautiful I and thou. So that distinction is maintained. But in the case of Indian tradition, according to Professor Bhatt, the question of I and you will not arise. We, the concept is what Professor Bhatt sir was saying, that concept of we, which means nobody is excluded. Nobody lives beyond this boundary. So all of us belong to one boundary, belong to one category or one race. That is the reason why in Tamil we say Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir, and in Vedic term is that Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. So all this clearly shows that there is a place for peace. Though we have been very, very much struggling to reach this peace, it has been argued by all philosophers that absolute peace is possible. And Immanuel Kant is another very good example. And he's a German philosopher. He says that absolute peace is possible provided there is a limitation of human wants. Because most of the time, human being thinks that he has to consume everything. And in the morning, Professor Bhatt sir was making a reference to the environmental approach, where nature is bountiful, but at the same time, we must also know our limitations. So this is one way of understanding the notion of peace. And with this, I would like to conclude because I know that you are very much hungry like me. So I'll stop with that. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. And it was a very pleasure to listen to all these great speakers. And I could see my good friend, Professor Sambat Kumar and Professor Krishnan and Professor Srinivasan sir, my guru is Srinivasan sir, Professor Indraji, and others like Yajnesh sir, and then Magesh ji and others. Thank you very much.